Hello, Wolfpack. Looking for great games to try out? Well, this time we're doing a special review. We're doing the top 5 games produced by Telltale Games. Number 5. The Wolf Among Us. This game is actually based on a comic series made by DC Comics and Vertigo Comics called The Fables. I'm not really sure what it's about. I've never really read it, but the game does a good job introducing you to the universe. Your playable character is the Big Bad Wolf, otherwise called Big B Wolf, who is now a reformed criminal serving as the sheriff of Fabletown, protecting its civilians from the normal people. Call them what you want, muggles or normies, whatever. But that's pretty much his job. However, unfortunately, a serial killer comes out of nowhere who's threatening to kill all Fables, starting with the people closest to Big B Wolf. And Big B, of course, has to investigate this crime to stop more death coming to the Fabletown. The story is pretty complex and entertaining, actually. It definitely feels like a noir kind of story. If you like LA noir, then you'll definitely love this game. However, one of the bad things is the graphics. These are the weirdest graphics I've ever seen. Not helped by the fact that they tried making it based off of a comic book, and they used the comics animation just to make the game's graphics, which doesn't really work out in a video game. But Telltale has never been really well known for their mind-blowing graphics, but you can get past them through the good story. Another problem is that there's way too much talking, but since you're a detective, that's kind of the point. However, it doesn't make for an interesting game if you're talking to everyone. But there is a lot of fighting, too, and Big B is awesome at that. One thing that did improve in this game is the combat for Telltale's games. The combat is very straightforward, and it does give you hints. However, it is very fun and action-packed, which does make it have a lot of high playable quality. Not to mention, this is one of the few Telltale games with replay value in it, which means you'll get to go back, because there's so many collectibles. You collect the biographies of the Fables, and they're very easy to miss, which is very rare since Telltale Games is also infamous for not having replay value in most of their games. But The Wolf Among Us is definitely one game you'll want among your collection of Telltale games. Number 4. The Game of Thrones video game. No, this is not that terrible Game of Thrones game that they made as some kind of cheap hack and slash game. This one's actually a much more entertaining game. For starters, the graphics are beautiful in this game. For once, Telltale's graphics have significantly improved, and they made the characters look like actual people this time. Another good thing is that they actually have real actors from the Game of Thrones show. Yeah, it's very awesome knowing that there were actors from the show who cared to come into this video game, but that's because the game was funded by HBO. The cons, well, the major problem is the Game of Thrones game is only good if you're a Game of Thrones fan. It happens during the show's time, right after Season 3 and before Season 4. Which is kind of weird because they don't introduce us to the game's universe at all. I went into this game trying to learn more about Game of Thrones since all my friends talk about it. I didn't know anything about Game of Thrones going into the game, and I didn't learn anything about Game of Thrones coming out of the game. So my view might be slightly distorted. For starters, I think there's something about a family fighting over a really hard wood. Trust me, it makes sense in context. But there was a lot of gore in this game, too. I hate to say it, but there was even more gore in this than in The Walking Dead. Yeah, a game that features flesh-eating monsters destroying our entire world had less gore than Game of Thrones, which can be good or bad. And another con is that this game is very depressing. No matter what you do, everyone just suffers, and every moment of happiness is ripped right out of you, and the game even has a depressing ending, like some of Telltale's games. And there's a very huge lack of replay value in this game. Like, once you play it, you'll never want to play it again, not even for fun, because, as I said, most of the game is depressing. But one thing that is cool is the action adventure you have to go through. But the bad news is all your choices are rendered meaningless in the finale. Another con that Telltale's infamously known for is that sometimes your choices don't mean anything in the finale. But if you're a Game of Thrones fan, this is definitely a game you'll really love since it's getting a second season on its own, being the second Telltale game to actually get one of those. Yes, Game of Thrones, although it has a lot of depressingness, gore, and it alienates your audience a lot with its complex stories, there is a lot of cool graphics, cool action, and superb acting. Game of Thrones is definitely one of Telltale's most hard-worked games on ever, and you'll probably like it even if you just play through it once. Number 3. Back to the Future, the game. Yes, this actually outdid Game of Thrones and The Wolf Among Us, mostly because it has something a lot of Telltale's games lacked, replay value. Yes, this game has so many achievements that you'll actually want to play it again because some of them are easily missed, which if you're an achievement hunter like me, you'll really want to go back and get those achievements, especially because they're very easy to earn, actually. But on the good side, a lot of the main actors from the films actually reprise their roles. It actually has Christopher Lloyd as the Doc. Michael J. Fox comes back as future Marty. No, he's not the real Marty. They actually got a replacement voice actor for him. But he does a very convincing job at portraying Fox's role. And in the 30th anniversary edition, I believe Biff's actor comes back to reprise his old role as well. And of course, he did such a great job in the movie, I have no doubt he'll do great in the game. But the game is very good. It's much more family-friendly compared to most of Telltale's games. And you'll probably love playing it because of the lack of blood, gore, and morality choices. However, the cons, the graphics, they look so weird and cartoony. I mean, look at Doc Brown. He's like a cross between Albert Einstein and B. Arthur. But the graphics aren't too distracting. You do get past them after a while playing the games. But even though the graphics are weird, hey, Back to the Future was a weird movie too, so it's only fitting that these cartoony graphics look exactly like the feel of the Back to the Future movie. But yes, Back to the Future was one of Telltale's greatest games, and it's definitely an exciting adventure that gets you pumped. It has comedy, horror, drama, and of course the great adventure that the movie had. Almost as if it was a fourth movie. Back to the Future is definitely one of Telltale's greatest games that you might want to have in your collection. Number 2. Tales from the Borderlands. This was one of Telltale's best video games ever made. It's got a lot of comedy, adventure, and it actually feels like a real Borderlands game. I knew nothing about the Borderlands trilogy playing through this game, and then I learned a lot about it. It actually introduced me to their universe, something the Game of Thrones game failed to do for me. I actually bought all the episodes of Borderlands over Game of Thrones because it was so fun in the first episode that I just had to know the outcome. The characters are hilarious, and you love playing as them. Of course, in unusual Borderlands fashion, the morality is kind of gray in this game, and you get to decide whether you want to be a hero or a villain. But on another good note, even Handsome Jack comes back as some kind of Force AI ghost kind of thing, and he is one of the main characters, which makes getting to know Jack a lot more exciting than it was in the original game he was introduced. The gameplay is fun. The content, sometimes it's dramatic, sometimes it's emotional and dead serious, but a lot of times it's very funny. Well, it's more of an experience. Once you play through it once, you might not have the drive to go back and play it again. However, it does have replay value to it just because you want to see those hilarious scenes again and see the different outcomes if you made different choices, because your choices do matter in this game, which is definitely great because Telltale had an infamous background of not living up to the choices you make in their final episodes, but your choices do matter in Tales from the Borderlands. I can't even describe into words how fun the story was, how deep it was, and how entertaining it was. You definitely have to check it out sometime. Tales from the Borderlands is definitely one of Telltale's greatest video games ever made. And finally, we reach our number 1. The Walking Dead. Yes, the entire series of The Walking Dead. Season 1, Season 2, 400 Days, and the upcoming Michonne DLC, which will hopefully be good, and the upcoming Season 3, where hopefully we'll get to see more of Clementine's adventures. This game is one of Telltale's best games ever made. For starters, you don't need to know anything about the show when going into it, because the game does a good job introducing you to the basics of the Walking Dead universe. You don't have to know any of the characters from the TV show because none of them are in it. You follow an entirely different group and their troubles during the zombie apocalypse. The gameplay is great. The action is awesome. The walkers do look a bit convincing like the shows. One of the problems is the graphics, which is, of course, one of Telltale's weaknesses because this was one of their earlier games, and this was the game that put them on the map. The graphics are a bit weird, almost cartoony, not like Tales from the Borderlands or Back to the Future, but not as great as Game of Thrones' graphics. However, the story is a lot more simplistic and easily to follow, unlike Game of Thrones, which is much more complex and too hard to comprehend. And there is a bit of gore in this game, but as I said, Game of Thrones really topped the gore department for Telltale Games. Walking Dead actually has less gore than Game of Thrones, but it does have a fair share of gross scenes a lot too. But one of the things I do love is that the gameplay does go deep, and the story is so entertaining, and you want to see the outcome. You want to see which characters live and which ones die. And, of course, Clementine and Lee's relationship is probably the best. A lot of people voted that Clementine is actually the best video game child character in any game, and that says a lot, really. The Walking Dead is one of Telltale's greatest games, but the lack of replay value is there too. Like, once you play through it once, you'll never want to go back, and just like Game of Thrones, it does have its share of depressing scenes that will make you cry, and maybe not even want to play the game through. But The Walking Dead does win a lot of fans because it's always moving and there's always a beacon of light for a brighter future for our survivors. The Walking Dead is Telltale's #1 greatest game ever made. And here are some honorable mentions that you might have wanted to see on this list, but didn't quite make it in. Sam & Max and Minecraft the Story Mode. Sam & Max, I honestly don't know anything about, so I can't tell you about it, but a lot of people on Steam say it's a really good game and actually voted it higher than The Walking Dead, which makes me very curious on what's inside of it. As for Minecraft the Story, it's still releasing episodes, and I don't know anything about the Minecraft world, so I can't really speak up for the Minecraft community. However, a lot of people say it's good, but then there are some people who say it's bad and spits on the whole Minecraft society as a whole, so I can't really pick a side. But Minecraft does get its fair share of viewerships, and people do want to see the outcome. Definitely worth checking out, considering it's also a family-friendly game. We hope you enjoyed seeing this list, and join us again for more lists. Don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe, and join Wolf and Friends Gaming for future videos. Goodbye.